in this lesson we're not going to add any new functionality to our application, and instead we'll focus on improving some parts of our existing code. And first of all, I prefer to make this indicator move down a little bit slower, because currently every second it's moving down by the time which corresponds to 5 minutes. So let's change it, and every second this indicator will move down by 1 minute. So we need to make this change in the global module time.js. Let's scroll down to the place where we are registering timer which executes every second. So right here we need to change these numbers, since we'd like our timeline indicator move down by 1 minute every second. We'll replace these values with the constant seconds in minute and multiply this value by milliseconds in second, and this way we'll achieve desired effect. So before checking this out, we have to import the constant seconds in minute in this file, and now as we can see, timeline indicator moves down much slower. Next, I would like to focus on another aspect related to the component, the timeline indicator. So let's open up this component in the editor, and right here we can see two hooks on activated and on deactivated that manage the timer, which updates a reactive variable responsible for tracking the current date. But I think this component, the timeline indicator, is not really the best place to control the timer, which updates current time every second. Because looking at our application, we only need to listen for time changes every second while we have timeline page open. So the timer starts every time we switch over to the timeline page, and it stops when we leave this page. And therefore, let's just move that logic responsible for starting and stopping the timer into the timeline component. So I'll cut these two lines from here and move them inside the timeline component, like this. But as we can see, this component already has an activated hook, so we need to combine these two function calls, scroll to current hour and start timer, into one closure, like this. And then let's remove this second call of an activated hook. And then we have to import some of the additional functions, such as start timer and stop timer. So let's go back to the timeline component and add an import statement for start timer and stop timer functions. And also we are referencing on deactivated hook, so let's add an import for this hook. And inside the timeline indicator component, these hooks are no longer used, so they can be removed. So now we just need to make sure that our timeline indicator will continue going down once we're gonna come back to the timeline page. And as we can see, after I'll switch pages, timeline indicator still moves down. So everything is working. Let's improve another thing. And in particular, what I'd like to focus now on is navItem component. This component is responsible for rendering navigation menu items. And what I'd like to do in here is that when we are located on timeline page, and then we'll click on the timeline menu item, I would like the page to be smoothly scrolled to the timeline item, which corresponds to the current hour. So I would like to achieve the same behavior that currently happens whenever I click on the logo component. As we can see, the page is scrolled to the current timeline item. So let's go back to the editor. And in this navItem component, we can see that we have click event listener registered in here, and once click occurs, we call navigate function. And also let's take a look at what happens when we click on the logo. Let's go to the logo component. And right here, as a listener for the click event on the logo, we are using handle click function, which besides navigating to a different page, also checks if we are currently located on the timeline page. Instead of navigating away, we're going to scroll the page to a current timeline item by using scroll to current hour function call. Alright, so let's use this function implementation as a reference for our handler inside nowItem component. I'm going to copy over this function, paste it inside nowItem component, and in addition to checking if we are currently located on the timeline page, we also have to check that nowItem object corresponds to the timeline nowItem, because current nowItem component is used to render all navigation items, not only timeline item. So additionally, we're gonna check if property page of nowItem object matches name of the timeline page. We're going to call the function scroll to current hour, which will scroll the page smoothly to the current timeline item. Otherwise, we're basically going to navigate to a different page by calling navigate function. But in this case, since we not always will navigate to timeline page, we have to use the page which current nowItem object corresponds to, like so. And all we have to do now is to specify the reference to this handle click function inside click listener in here. So now let's import all missing pieces in this component, such as scroll to current hour function, as well as page timeline constant. And now there is also one more change that we have to do in order to allow clicks on the active navigation item. And that is remove this CSS class pointer events none, which disables all clicks on navigation item. Since now we're gonna allow clicking on the active navigation item, so let's remove this class. So it's time to test the whole thing in a browser. I'm going to navigate to a different page and then come back to the timeline page. Scroll down, and now if I will click on the timeline navigation item again, I'm supposed to be scrolled to the current timeline item. That is exactly what we are seeing. Our behavior is working. So now, if we're going to click on the active navigation item, as well as on the logo while being on the timeline page, the page will be automatically scrolled to the current timeline item. So let's continue working on our project in the next lesson, and the link to the source code of this project will be in the video description.